Ladies and gentlemen, what's happening? Good evening, fight fans. We are just one day away from one of the most highly anticipated fights of this era. Tomorrow night, in case you didn't know, under the bright lights of the Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas, you got more than 65,000 fans that are gathering together, packing the house for watching a battle of undisputed glory at 168 pounds in boxing. And for the first time, on top of that, you can watch it all live on Netflix, which is pretty cool for those that just don't like paying pay-per-view for something. So we're talking about Saul Canelo Alvarez versus Terence Bud Crawford. This is very much a collision of styles. For many of you who are familiar with them, then you're already familiar that both of these guys pack extreme excitement when they come into the ring. And at the age that they're at already, Saul being at 35, he's already a four-division world champion. He comes in with a record of 63 wins, 2 losses, 39 knockouts, and he's 11-0 at super middleweight as the undisputed king of the division as well. And so Bud, though, he's got a record of his own, right? Standing at 41-0 with 31 knockouts, one of the most complete technicians, arguably, that people can say in modern boxing. Switch hitter as well, which has a tendency to be able to position him in a way to take people out that just surprises people and really is electric for fans to share. And so we're going to get into that today. I'm joined by my co-host, Steve Gallegos here. And Steve, what are your thoughts right off the bat here? Let's get into talking a little bit about the tell of the tape, if you would, in a minute. But what are your overall thoughts leading up to this magnificent event?
Well, this is basically a dream match. Two best fighters of this era. I mean, you couldn't. These two have accomplished everything that you can possibly accomplish. This is like the final mountain for pretty much both of them, particularly Crawford. Trying to see who's the best, who's the best pound for pound. It's a pound for pound dream match.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a clash of styles. Size versus skill. Um, you don't know what you're going to get in this fight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, an interesting thing right off the gate is you got the betting odds already have Canelo at minus 130. So it's not hugely lopsided, which tells you that some people are thinking and maybe favoring the fact that you got a guy like Crawford, who is this tactician, switch hitter, may pose some early on problems for Canelo, which is known, at least now in his later years, he's known to maybe start off a little bit slower than what he used to. The output isn't the same as before, and he gets started a little bit later, which some are arguing that could prove beneficial to Crawford's case. But I want to pull up a visual if we could here as well, and we can kind of talk through this a little bit here. So, as mentioned earlier, we got Canelo standing at 63 2-2, right? 39 KOs, 4 titles, orthodox in stance right off the bat as well. With Crawford, he's looking at 41-0, 31 KOs, 4 titles, southpaw, right? However, one of the things that a lot of people are arguing, and by the way, anybody that's tuning in, listening to this, we'd love to hear your comments and tell us who you're picking for this fight. Are you Team Canelo? Are you Team Crawford? Is it a pick 'em for you? What's the case? We want to hear what your thoughts are. But we do know that Crawford's coming in at this. He's jumping up dramatically for this bout. Steve, do you think that that's particularly problematic for him, being that hasn't jumped at this weight or fought at this weight before, and he's been used to fighting, 2 divisions underneath this?
I thought it was problematic. Earlier when this fight was made, for the longest time, I didn't want this fight to be made. It felt that it made absolutely no sense for Crawford to come up that high and
Mm-hmm.
having to come up to Canelo's weight and not have a catch weight like a lot of these kind of fights do. He's coming right up to Canelo's weight, and he says he wants to beat him at his best. So he's getting what he asked for, and but looking the way that Crawford looks, he's bulked up very well. You can tell he's trained very hard for this fight. Um, Basically, his boxing IQ is probably the best in the sport. It's carried him a long ways, and that's what's going to win him the fight if he does indeed win is skill and technique and boxing IQ. That's good. That's going to come down to the boxing IQ of Crawford as to what can he do. Can he use his smarts to outbox Canelo, who's just a brute force. Canelo was a very good boxer himself, but Crawford is the better boxer out of the two. His skill
Really?
set is like second to none.
Okay. So when it comes to boxing IQ, you're putting Crawford a little bit ahead of Canelo.
Yes, I am. I'm not, like I said, I'm not. I'm not putting Canelo down. Canelo is a fairly good boxer as well. He's evolved fairly well over the years, but his strengths is his power and his strength. He's got that farm boy strength. And it's just he's naturally a strong person. In terms of Crawford, whose skill set, puts him in another level.
Okay. Well, let's talk about another interesting point of conversation as well, and that being, career opponents of these two, because there's a lot of potential contentions, of people saying, "Hey, who has this guy fought?" We even seen that in some of the buildup in the press releases, right, or the press conferences taking shape of that being called out. And could people make a case for that? Can Canelo make a case for that? That Bud hasn't really faced anybody. I mean, the laundry list that we got here on Canelo's roster is pretty deep. I mean, you're talking guys like early on, obviously Mayweather, Aries Landy Lara, Miguel Cotto, Golovkin, Amir Khan, Daniel Jacobs, Kovalev. Some of these guys were past their prime, of course, but you got Charlo, Munguia, right? Some of these guys that he's faced off later in his career, he has had a hard time putting them away. But if we're looking at a side by side observation and we're talking, okay, who's Bud fought? Bud's got Ricky Burns, Gamboa, right?
Yep.
Victor Postol, Jeff Horn, Jose Benavidez Jr., Kell Brook, Sean Porter was probably one of the ones that probably gave him the feather in his cap. I would say was with Sean Porter.
And don't forget Errol Spence, his biggest nemesis.
That's what I was going to say next. Yep, and he took him
And
out.
he did. He is conquered every mountain that's been put in front of him, from 130 up to 147, 154. He just spent too much time there. You can't say that the Madrimov fight, made Crawford what he is. He had a bad night at the office. It does happen. Didn't have the best night, but neither did Canelo have a great fight against Skull or John Ryder. These are the kind of things that happen in the sport. I think with these two fighters, the bigger the event, the bigger the moment, the bigger, the better the performance. So I think it's going to be the case with both of these guys in this one.
Okay. Yeah, well, let's talk about back to the boxing IQ piece that you had mentioned just a bit ago. I was alluding earlier to the fact that Canelo's punch volume has dipped in recent fights, which is, a fact. Do you think that this opens the door for Crawford to steal rounds early on and help him from an activity and precision perspective?
Oh, most definitely. Crawford has always been a fast starter. Canelo, he takes a few rounds to get going. So I think what Crawford can do is just take advantage of that inactivity and steal them early rounds, and whole filling out part, and try and stay away from him and not let Canelo land them big bombs. Once Canelo starts ripping them punches to the body and uppercuts, he just starts taking over. But I think Crawford's skill set, his IQ, his technique to counter that. I honestly believe he could.
So for anybody that's tuned in right now, I see some people that are live across different platforms. We're broadcasting this around looks like 8 different platforms here. We want to hear what you have to say. Who are you picking? Are you picking Canelo? You picking Crawford, and why? If that's the case, we're interested to know who your pick is for this showdown taking place tomorrow evening. Let's continue the conversation down from a point of hypothetics here, because you can look at the betting odds table and predict different scenarios taking shape and whatnot. But if we're talking championship rounds, which I could see this thing going all the way to the championship rounds and coming to a decision, who do you think or who do you trust more to adjust and take over in these later rounds, Canelo or Crawford?
I will say Bud.
Really? Why?
because he's, like I said, it goes back to his boxing IQ, his skill set. He's a switch hitter, and that you could use that to his advantage. And even though Canelo does get better as the fight goes on, Crawford does too. Um, if Crawford could stay away, like I said, he is the better boxer of the two, and if he can impose his will and fight his fight, um, then he could win this fight. He can use the same blueprint that Floyd Mayweather used against
Mm-hmm.
Canelo, even though that was a lifetime ago.
Sure.
He showed that Canelo can be outboxed. Even
Mm-hmm.
Erislandy Lara did the same thing too.
Yeah,
So,
might make some people mad about that one.
I mean, I still think Canelo beat Lara, but he had he was getting outboxed at times.
Mm-hmm.
So we've
Yeah.
seen it happen.
What about from beyond titles? What about from a legacy perspective from this win? Who do you think will be remembered most, or how will history remember the winner versus the loser out of this bout? You think it's hurtful to anybody's stock on either way?
No, not at all. It's just the icing on the cake for both fighters. Both of these guys have accomplished everything that there is to accomplish in the sport. Multiple division titles. They got a whole trophy case full of title belts. They've accomplished it all. This is just to see who's who's going to be the best fighter of this era. That's what's
Mhm.
going to settle. But the loser ain't going to hurt their stock or their legacy one bit,
Mm.
because they've already established themselves.
Yeah. So if we were to, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm going to put you on the spot. If you were to pick an outcome of this, what would your outcome be? What's your 80-20 take? 80% it's going to go this way, slight percentage that it's going to go this way.
You know what? I'm gonna have to go with skill and technique. Um, I was always, for the longest time, I was saying that Canelo was just too big, but skill and technique, I feel will be the story of this fight, and I'll pick Crawford to win the decision.
Oh, snap. It's official, huh? Crawford for the decision.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've thought about it over and over again, and
Mhm.
probably gonna have to give the edge to Bud. Bud has it. Bud has that IQ that served him very well throughout his career. Switch hitting. If he can impose his will on him, he can outbox Canelo. But if
Mhm.
like I say, if he stands in front of Canelo, end of the night for him.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, let's discuss that a little bit and unpack it. So you got a guy like Crawford who he is a switch hitter. He does have, what is it, like a 4-inch reach, I think, on Canelo as well. They both stand about the same height here. Um, and Canelo does like to walk people down. It's not very often that you've seen somebody impose their will on him and have him being the one that's pushed back. So, do you think Crawford's going to have an easy time in getting out of these situations where Canelo likes to cut the ring off and put people in positions where they have to be against the ropes, or do you think that Bud's already a step ahead of that and he's going to be using that 4-inch reach to make sure he's got that space?
Well, that's one scenario that Bud, will use that reach and outbox him. Um, but if but there's another scenario where Canelo, just uses that strength of his, starts landing them combinations to the body and head, and then just starts breaking Crawford down. That's another scenario that could happen. We could see
Hmm.
either one. It all depends on who's going to impose their will, who's going to make the other fight their fight.
Yeah, and that's where I think, I'm in a way I'm kind of rooting for Bud because it's kind of a Cinderella story when I start thinking about it, for Bud. I just wonder if Canelo, his size and his experience is just going to be, and power will be too much to bite, too much to chew off,
You
especially if.
know, that's another scenario too that it could end up going that way for Canelo. That Crawford probably bit off more than he can chew, and that's a scenario that's not out of the question. It can happen. It's going to go one way or the other.
Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. I
So
want to go ahead.
yeah, so I'm leaning towards more for Crawford. I mean, we follow Crawford, for the last 10 years. We when we were doing the title fight, we covered him nonstop, and we've seen him
Mhm.
conquer every mountain.
Yeah.
So, so
No,
yeah,
no doubt.
that's
Yeah, I've enjoyed seeing Crawford develop over the years and seeing him,
yep,
like you said, climb every one of these mountains and overcome because he has,
yeah. And
no
then
doubt.
for the longest time, for years, they kept talking about a Crawford Spence fight, and it finally gets made, and Crawford just dominates. You
Oh
know,
man, yeah, he demolished him. It was more than domination. I think he just straight up destroyed Spence. That was kind of a sad scenario, and totally did not see that coming myself. I did not see that scenario playing out the way that it did. But I think it highlights this other piece of Bud that might be an overlooked factor as well, and that is you do have a hungry dog in the fight here. Does Canelo still have the same hunger? I mean, he's at the top of the food chain right now, right? When it comes to the sport of
yes,
boxing.
he is. I don't, I've over the last few years, last 2 or 3 years, I felt Canelo's maybe lost a little bit of a step. I mean, he's once he conquered 168, it's kind of gone a little downhill for him. He did, fight Bivol, fought a much bigger man, moved up to a weight class he probably shouldn't have been fighting at, and then came back down, and you know. He did come back and beat a really good young fighter in Munguia, so
Hmm.
so it's kind of hit or miss whether with Canelo. He may look really good like he did against Munguia, or he may look, like he's lost a step against fighters like John Ryder. I mean,
Hmm.
you never know. You never know when either of these fighters could get old.
Yeah. And I want to do a curveball here if we could, and just mention the fact that this thing is also going to be broadcasted on Netflix, right? For the first time, there's not a pay-per-view stamp attached to this thing, which, man, I don't even know when pay-per-view started, but it's been a long time since it started.
Oh, about at least almost 40 years.
Wow.
Back in the first reign of Tyson. That's when the pay per view started. Back
Wow.
then, they still had closed circuit, but
Mhm.
then towards the end of the '80s, that's when pay per view began.
Yeah. And so I wanted to just mention that briefly for the fact that this is kind of opening up a broad opportunity for people to begin to witness these types of matchups that were previously maybe shut out from experiencing it. And what is your take about these recent deals that are taking shape? I mean, the UFC just announced one recently too, I think, right? With the deal with Paramount, and um, you got this now taking shape as well, where they're
Yep.
partnering with overseas billionaires and people that are tycoons in their industry to change up the model as a whole. I don't understand personally all the logistics behind it and how that changes the hands of where the money's going and whatnot. Because you would be thinking that now maybe, I don't know, does this now open up a whole broad new opportunity for a lot of these fighters to get their just due when it comes to paydays and notoriety and exposure that they weren't given access to before, or is this going to be just another shift in how things are done, and same people are getting richer? What do you think?
I hope it goes down the path that it's going down. Where fighters are getting better exposure. That it continues to be shown on these streaming platforms such as Netflix. This reminds me of what the Zone was when they first started. It was just a standalone subscription. You pay $10, you get all the fights. There wasn't no pay per view, but as time went on, they started charging more, and then they started adding pay per views on top of it. So your
Hmm.
subscription couldn't get you the fight without you having to shell out another $80. So I see what Turkey Al is doing. I hope he sticks with it. It's good for the fans. They've seen what the whole with this new age of streaming can do, and we'll see how it pans out. I'm hoping that they continue on this path, and that go back to someone like the old days. We can watch the big bouts on network television.
Yeah, no, that's
So
true. Yeah, it does look like the shift is intending to one drawing a bigger reach and hoping that the audiences will cling to this subscription model, which will incentivize, higher viewership, more companies to be involved, a higher premium on the fight cards themselves, which may incentivize the fighters as a result of that from the combined viewership and interest that they have across the globe, really now, because it's a global thing. But we'll see. Yeah, I'm excited to see what will shake up from here as well. I think that it could lead to some good things. We'll see what happens there. Well, I don't want to get too much into the undercard because one, we don't have a bunch of time left on here. But I will just ask you: is there any particular fight on the undercard, Steve, that you're paying attention to, or do you think is worth keeping our eyeballs on?
It is the co-feature, between Callum Walsh and Fernando Vargas Jr. It's a nice clash of styles. It's almost like a crossroads fight. Neither one of these guys are on the. These guys are very young, very undefeated, and they're taking the chance of fighting each other. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a classic boxer versus puncher type of fight. Vargas, he's a straightforward, try and get you out quick type of fighter. He's got the mentality of no overtime being paid in boxing. I want to get in and out as quickly as possible. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
Walsh is more of a more conventional, very fun fighter to watch. I love the way he puts together combinations beautifully to the body and head. He doesn't have that one punch power, but he's more like a singles and doubles hitter where he'll break you down. He only got what four knockouts in I don't know however many fights he has, 17 fights. So it's not um so he doesn't have the one punch power. It's just a clash of good styles. We'll see who can impose their will on the other, whether we see Walsh, break him down systematically, outbox him, or if Vargas just goes in there and just goes for the gusto and then scores an early knockout.
Yeah,
So,
and I don't know if many remember this or know this, but this is the Vargas Jr. He's a 29-year-old son of the former two-time world champion Fernando Vargas,
yep,
who
absolutely.
you guys remember him with the what do they used to call that? The quail tail.
I don't know what that was called.
It looked like a little quail they used to have
Yeah,
there. But
very popular back in the 90s. I remember.
yeah, yeah. So now you got his son picking up the mantle here, huh?
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, I'm hoping that he will learn from the mistakes that his father made during his career. They're seeming to bring him up a little bit more slowly and probably better than they did with his old man. And he still hasn't fought for a world title yet. They're bringing him up, I believe, the right way. And
mhm,
if he can settle down a little bit on his punches, instead of trying to go for the knockout each time,
mhm.
he might end up seeing a pretty special career here.
Yeah, absolutely. He was a late starter of the game. He didn't start till 17 because he played basketball and football, I think it was. And so a lot of people are watching this, even though he's a late starter of the game. These guys might be on equal playing ground here because it seems that neither one of them have been into deep waters. And so this, yeah, could very well prove to be a pretty good firefight between these two guys. So actually, I think it's going to be a really good fight personally. That's awesome. Well, we are going to take a peek at who else is here. I was getting your comments here. I do see some people commenting over here saying they're thinking Canelo because of experience they were picking. We got others thinking that it's Crawford via his ring IQ. So we can appreciate the differences in opinion here. We'd love to keep you dropping that if you would as well. If you have a thought, you have an opinion about who you think is going to take home the strap from this particular fight here. Steve, any last words before we check out for the evening?
You know, it's going to be a chess match, I believe. It may not be the whole fight of the year type of thing, but it's going to be a huge event. In fact, I was at the Canelo Saunders fight at Cowboy Stadium. Probably about 3 or 4 years ago, and it broke the attendance record for the biggest crowd in American history when it comes to boxing. well over like 72, 73,000, something like that. I have a
Mhm.
feeling this fight's going to break that record. So it's going to be a huge event. Hopefully, we get drama. Like I said, it's not going to be a slugfest. It'll be a chess match, but it'll be a very exciting chess match. It can go either one way or the other. Either Crawford outboxes him, uses his IQ to outbox him and avoid dangerous exchanges, or Canelo finds closes the gap, lands his hard punches the body in the head, that uppercut that's lethal, and we see him break him down. I wouldn't be surprised at either scenario. So if I'm not counting out Canelo, I can see it happening, and if he does, then then I'll admit I was wrong. But I'm gonna go. But I'm gonna go with Crawford based on skill, IQ, technique, and his experience too. He's a very experienced fighter. And he's spent a lot of years coming up. Conquered all these divisions. Both of them have accomplished so much. But either way, this is just the icing on the cake for both of them. It's pretty much they're going to ride into the sunset after this one. I don't really see much to prove for either fighter. Probably more so Canelo. He's probably going to stick around a little while, but this is pretty much Crawford's swan song.
Yeah, and for me, this is kind of a pick'em fight. Honestly, I don't know. I don't know who to pick on this one. My heart tells me Canelo's gonna win, but my head says Crawford's got something up his sleeve, man. I mean, we've never seen these guys drop the way that they've been, the way that they've dropped other people before too. So that's also one of those, I don't know, kind of.
Neither one of them has ever been hurt.
Right.
Period. Especially Crawford. So, and Canelo has never been hurt. I don't even think he's ever been knocked down either. So let's see if either one of these guys can take the other into deep waters that they've never experienced before. It'll be interesting.
Absolutely. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Well, thank you so much for tuning in with us here today as we dissected Canelo versus Crawford, taking shape tomorrow, September 13th. We're in Las Vegas, and we still would like your feedback. You can go ahead and drop it in the comments on whatever platform you're watching this from. And for more post-fight coverage on a regional and a national scale, global scale, you can visit us at TheTitleFight.com or TheBoiseBeat.com. Until next time, stay blessed.